Hello, hello, friends. Welcome on in, everybody. Welcome. If you're new to the channel, my name is Triune, or Tri for short. Preferred pronouns they, them, but any and all are acceptable. Hey, we are doing another episode of Such a Brew About Nothing, the Magic the Gathering podcast, where we like to talk about commander decks, card combos, all kinds of different things. Basically, if it tickles my fancy in the world of gaming, then that's what we talk about. Usually talking about the different deck builds that I have. Lately, we've been doing a couple of pre-constructed decks. Of course, in our last episode from 2 weeks ago, we covered the Final Fantasy VI and Final Fantasy VII commander decks. But also covered some extra cards that I had in the sideboard that I just really liked. So we're going to do that again today, but now we have the Final Fantasy X and 14 decks. So the Counter Blitz and Scions and Spellcraft decks. I'll be honest, I'm much more familiar with Final Fantasy X. I'm not as familiar with Final Fantasy XIV in its characters and story moments and such, because I've just never played the game. It is an MMO, a massive multiplayer online role-playing game, and that's just never really been my fancy. But I like the cards. They're super cool looking, and they have quite a bit of synergy between them for a precon, to the extent that Y'shtola, the commander for that deck, has become one of the most populars in the Esper color combination. Do want to give everybody a heads up that we have ads incoming in about 3.5 minutes. If you don't want to watch ads, there's a few ways you can do that. Number one being by subscribing. It's like $6 a month, and you get 20 free emotes that you get to use all across Twitch, 10 animated and 10 non. As well as if you have Amazon Prime, you get a free subscription to a Twitch channel of your choice every month with Twitch Prime. Why not consider this channel? I think it's pretty good, but I'm also pretty biased. On top of that, maybe you're already subscribed to the channel and you want to pay it forward so that a member of the community doesn't have to watch ads. You can do so in the form of gift subs. It's a great way to pay it forward to the community and help a homie not watch ads. On top of that, if you have Twitch Turbo, it lets you watch ad-free across all of Twitch. It's like $13 a month or something like that. And Twitch then pays the streamer the same amount as if a tier 1 sub is watching during a scheduled ad break. So, pretty good bang for your buck while also supporting the content that you know and love. On top of those, I get it, the economy's in a weird place. If you can't afford any of those, you can always toss a coin to your streamer in the form of bits. It's a great way of saying, hey, I like what you do, keep doing it without breaking the bank. But do want to stress that any and all financial compensation on this channel is always appreciated but never required, and it is not for monetary gain or profit of any kind. In fact, every cent that I have ever made on this channel just goes back into the community in the form of gift subs. So, that said, we've gotten through the promo. We're still about a minute and a half until those ads start, but we will get right into the deck momentarily. Excuse me while I hydrate. So let's go ahead and flip the camera around here. And it looks like my camera is going to continue to give me the issues that it has been. So, I don't know why it keeps doing this. I'll probably just have to uninstall my app and reinstall it. So hold tight for a second, everybody. Let me flip the camera around manually, and we'll do it the old-fashioned way. There we go. That should maybe down a little bit more. Maybe one day my cameras will work with me. And we won't have technical difficulties. Boy, wouldn't that be a wonderful world. Let me back this up a little bit. Okay. There we go. That's as good as it's going to get, I suppose. So let's go ahead and get on into the deck here. Up first, we have the commander for the deck, Tidus, Yuna's Guardian. Costs green, white, and blue, so Bant, for a legendary human warrior 3/3, and has, at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may move a counter from target creature you control onto a second target creature you control. Worth noting, this does not have to be a +1/+1 counter. It could be any kind of counter that you have on that creature. You can just move them from one to another. And also has the ability Cheer, which of course is a spell that Tidus, and yes, I know that officially it's Tidus, but it seems like Square Enix can't even fully nail that down when you have characters in Kingdom Hearts that also say Tidus, and I've just always said it that way for the last 25 years, so I'm just going to continue to say it that way, and we'll just have to be okay with that. Okay? Okay. The ability Cheer says whenever one or more creatures you control with counters on them deal combat damage to a player, you may draw a card and proliferate. Do this only once each turn. So, he kind of fuels himself in that counter moving. If you have, we'll say, 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature, you move one onto another one, you attack with both of them. When each of them deal damage to a player, you get to draw a card and proliferate. So you are only doing that once per turn, though. So that's how it gets around the, oh, if I swing at one player and swing at another player, I get to draw 2 cards and proliferate twice. No, because it does have that addendum at the end that it only does it once each turn. But Tidus is a great commander to help. He doesn't necessarily propagate your counters, but there's enough pieces in this deck to add counters themselves, and then Tidus acts as a great commander to help you redistribute them around. So moving on into the backup commander, we have probably my favorite character in all of Final Fantasy. We have Yuna Grand Summoner, 1 green, white, blue for a legendary human cleric, 1/5 with Grand Summon. You can tap, add a mana of any color. When you cast your next creature spell this turn, that creature enters with 2 additional +1/+1 counters on it. So, Yuna acts as a mana dork. Note that mana doesn't necessarily have to be spent on a creature. You could spend it on anything. But the say you do this and then you cast some ramp spell and then you cast a creature. It doesn't really matter what the next spell is that you cast, it's just when you next cast a creature spell, it's getting 2 1/1 counters. Which then Tidus could move one of those counters onto something else, helping you do your proliferate stuff. Also has, whenever another permanent you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, if it had 1 or more counters on it, you may put that number of +1/+1 counters on target creatures. So she kind of acts like the Ozolith has a similar thing, that if a creature dies, you if it had counters, you put those counters on the Ozolith, and then at the start of combat, you move those counters from the Ozolith onto a creature. This does a similar thing, except on a body. Now, worth noting, one of the cool interactions you can do with this is because you're not just moving those counters, you're putting that many, just like with Ozolith. If you have something like a doubling season in play, it does double. So, when you use Grand Summon to make mana, you'll have a creature enter with 4 +1/+1 counters, and if that creature dies, you would take its 4+1/+1 counters and put it on something else, doubling it to 8, right? So this can get out of hand with a single doubling season. Next up, we have Waka, Devoted Guardian, 2 green-white for a legendary human warrior with 4/4 with reach and trample. And whenever Waka deals combat damage to a player, destroy up to 1 target artifact that player controls and put a 1/1 counter on Waka. Also has Blitzball Captain. At the beginning of your end step, if a counter was put on Waka this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. So he kind of helps fuel himself, putting 1/1 counters and then boosting your board while also providing some helpful artifact removal for your opponents. Or against your opponents, I should say. I guess I should probably talk about the background of the characters, just in case anyone watching is not familiar with these characters from their source material. Tidus is, of course, the player character that you play as in Final Fantasy X. Yuna is, in my opinion, the main character. Tidus is the player character, but Yuna is the main character. She is a summoner who is on a pilgrimage to gain these summons to ultimately defeat the BBEG in the game, Sin, who's a giant whale thing that basically lays waste to the world of Spira. She is accompanied by these guardians, of which Tidus is one, as well as Waka, who is also the captain of a blitzball team and one of Yuna's guardians. Next up, we have Kamari, Valiant Guardian, 2 green-blue for a legendary cat warrior, 3/3 with vigilance, and Ronso Rage. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Kamari and tap target creature an opponent controls. Then you may have Kamari become a copy of that creature, except its name is Kamari, Valiant Guardian, and it has vigilance and this ability. So every combat step of yours, he's going to get bigger and become a copy of something of your opponent's. Kamari is another guardian of Yuna's, as well as takes the role of a blue mage on your team. So he gains the ability to, he gains enemy abilities by copying them, right? So again, very flavorful, very thematic, that he's able to become copies of opponents' creatures. Next up, we have Riku, Resourceful Guardian, 2 and a blue for a legendary human artificer, 2/3, with whenever you put 1 or more counters on a creature until end of turn, that creature can't be blocked by creatures your opponents control. So she helps them sneak in. She also has the ability Steal for 1 and tap. Move a counter from target creature and opponent controls onto target creature you control. Activate only as a sorcery. So she can help move indestructible counters or flying counters, +1/+1 counters, anything that is problematic on your opponent's board, she could move it from them onto one of your creatures, so now you get that benefit. In addition, she helps you get in unblocked because Riku takes the role of your party's thief, which is why she has Steal. So she's stealing items from enemies and giving them to the party. Again, very thematic to her role in the game. Riku is one of Yuna's guardians, but also is of a different race than the other humanoid people we've seen, because they are all, they're all humans, but the Albed are slightly different in that they have these like green spirals in their eyes and believe much more in technology than I cannot remember the name of the religion that is prominent on Spira. But Riku happens to also be Yuna's cousin, so it's hard to tell on this card. In fact, I think her eyes are closed. Yes, they are. But Yuna actually has heterochromia because she is half Albed. So she has one of these green spiral eyes and a blue eye, showing her half Albed lineage. Next up, we have Lulu, Stern Guardian, for 2 and a blue. Legendary Human Wizard, 2/3, with whenever an opponent attacks you, choose target creature attacking you, put a stun counter on that creature. And for 3 and a blue, Proliferate. You can choose any number of permanents or players that have any kind of counter and add an additional one of that kind. So that's what Proliferate does. The fun thing about this is as long as you can afford to pay it, you can do it, and it doesn't have any timing restrictions, so you can proliferate at instant speed on your opponent's turns. Just like with Waka here, wanting to get counters, you can put counters on him on opponent's turns. Now note, the Blitzball Captain thing does only track at the end of your end step. But if you just absolutely need to get him huge so that he can get in with his reach and trample, then Lulu's a great way to do that. She is a guard. Lulu here is a guardian for Yuna, and also happens to be a love interest for Waka. Next up, we have Orin, Venerated Guardian. So you'll notice all of the Guardians of Yuna have the word Guardian in their card name. Orin here is 3 and a white for a legendary Human Spirit Samurai, 2/5 with Vigilance, and Shooting Star. Whenever Orin attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on him. When you do, exile target creature defending player controls with power less than Orin's power until Orin leaves the battlefield. So he gets bigger. He exiles something of your opponent's with power less than his. And they're just gone as long as he's in play. So he kind of has an Oblivion Ring or O-Ring effect. Orin is exceedingly strong. I've seen this card become a very big problem that is hard to deal with for your opponents because he's already a 2/5, and the first time he swings, he becomes a 3/6. So it's just hard to kill him, and he's removing your stuff, and he just keeps swinging in, but he has Vigilance, so he's attacking and is also there for defense, and just continues being a problem. Orin, of course, one of Yuna's guardians, but little backstory for Orin here, he also was one of Braska's guardians, who is Yuna's dad, who was a summoner before her. And as well as Tidus's father, Jekt. So Orin, Jekt, and Braska already made the pilgrimage that Yuna is on now, and he was the only survivor of that pilgrimage. And I won't say why he's a human spirit, because you should play the game. It's dope. Next up, we have Awaka, Traveling Merchant. 1 and a blue for a legendary human citizen. You can tap to remove a counter from a non-land permanent you control and draw a card. And he's a 1/2. Just a nice way to remove counters from your stuff if you don't have Tidus in play. You will see here shortly, we do have a number of the summons, the saga creatures, in this deck. And the nice thing about how sagas work is if there's a chapter you want to repeat over and over and over, if you can remove one of those lore counters, then when you move to your next first main phase of your turn, they'll just get that chapter that maybe they already got once before. So it's a great way to keep them doing the thing that you want them to do and keep your summons around longer. And as the name implies, a waka is a merchant that you regularly encounter throughout the game. Gata and Luzu is up next. 2 and a white for legendary human soldier. 1/1 with flash. And when Gata and Luzu enters, choose target creature you control. If damage would be dealt to that creature this turn, prevent that damage and put that many +1/+1 counters on it. These two are soldiers in the... What is the name of the Spira religion? I cannot remember now. Let me see if I can look that up right quick. But they are characters that you kind of encounter a few times here and there throughout the game. And depending on dialogue options by the player throughout the game, you can wind up with one of them dying, which kind of sucks because it's they're best friends slash, like, not necessarily that they are in a relationship, but they're extremely close. We'll put it that way. They are, it's the token, and they were roommates. We'll say it that way. I'm trying to see if I can find anyone that has the name of the religion in Spira in the deck. And I'm not seeing anybody. Let me see. Let me just look it up here. One moment, everybody. Because it's right on the tip of my tongue, and I know that I know it, and it's gonna drive me insane. The Teachings of Yevon. That's what it is. So it's, yeah, Yevon versus the Albed. So the people of Yevon, they believe in their more dogmatic teachings that technology is wrong, or machina, as it's called. And that the only way to deal with sin is by doing the pilgrimage and the summoner ultimately giving their life, and one of their guardians doing so as well, versus the Albed that believe that if they can get strong enough machina that they could kill sin that way. Well, Gata and Luzu are two soldiers in the Yevon army. Next up we have Shalinda, Yevon Acolyte. Oh, literally the next card. Awesome. Shalinda here costs a green and a white for a legendary human cleric, 2/2 with lifelink. And whenever another creature you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature if its power is less than Shalinda's. Otherwise, you put a +1/+1 counter on Shalinda. So Shalinda is an acolyte. She's an evangelist for Yevon. You encounter her a few times throughout the game, and she's preaching about the teachings of Yevon and yada yada yada. There's a whole underlying storyline for Final Fantasy X about, religion versus technology, the traditions of the past versus the advancements of the future. Yeah, it's a whole running theme with this game. Next we have Tromel Seymour's Butler, 2 and a green for a legendary elf advisor. 2/3 with each other non-token creature you control enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. That's just great. He just automatically lets your stuff enter with counters. On top of that, you can pay 1, tap, and proliferate X times, where X is the number of non-token creatures you control that entered this turn. So if you're doing a big storm turn where you're playing a bunch of stuff out, and you keep the 1 mana open, you could potentially proliferate all of them a ton. Trommel is very strong in my opinion when he works, but 9 times out of 10, you read this card to your opponents and they go, oh, that's a problem, it has to die. And they're right. Trommel, of course, is one of the Guado, who live in Guado Salam. They are primarily followers of the teachings of Yevon. Seymour, who Trommel is the butler of, is one of the recurring antagonists throughout the game. Next, we have Lord Jiskel Guado, 1 and a white for a legendary Spirit Cleric, 2/1 with flying. And at the beginning of each end step, if you put a counter on a creature this turn, investigate. So this is a good target for Lulu's Proliferate. So that way, if you're proliferating on opponent's turns, then you are still making clues, which you could then crack to draw cards. Jiskel here is Seymour's dad, who's been dead and in the far plane, kind of. It's a whole reveal thing about these unsent. And speaking of unsent, spirits, whenever a person dies in the world of Spira, they have to, the summoners have to perform a sending, which is this dance that will send the spirits to the far plane, which does have a doorway from the mortal realm to. You can walk into the afterlife as a living being. That doorway happens to be in Guado Salam, where Seymour and Jiskel are from. And if a spirit goes unsent, they then morph into the monsters that you encounter in the world. So it's very unsent are very big problems in the world of Spira, because if you don't send them, then they eventually can become monsters that you have to destroy. Up next, we have Maester Seymour himself, 2 and a green for a legendary human elf cleric. Interesting that he also has another type there. We'll discuss that in a moment. 1/3 with, at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to Maester Seymour's power on another target creature you control. And also has 3 green for Monstrosity X, where X is the number of counters among creatures you control. So Monstrosity, I believe, first showed up in Theros, if I remember correctly. Basically, if this creature isn't monstrous, you put X +1/+1 counters on it, and it then becomes monstrous. Because you do fight Seymour in the game, and he dies, but remains unsent, and becomes a monster you have to fight, who becomes pretty strong by the time you finally defeat him. Seymour here is actually human elf. They made the Guado elves for purposes of magic. But he's human elf because his mother was human. Because Jiskel, his dad, fell in love with a human woman. They gave birth to Seymour. He was kind of outcast and shunned and looked down on his entire life for not being pure Guado, because, you know, not only is there what's the word I'm looking for? Bigotry amongst people for their religions or their creeds, but there's also, I'm just going to come out and say it, it becomes a major plot evolution thing in the game. Waka, one of your party members, very famously hates the Albed, who is a race of people. and he's very outspoken in his followings of the teachings of Yevon, and then Riku joins the party, who is an Elbed. And it's also then revealed to Waka that the summoner that he's protecting is half Elbed, and he kind of grows as a person and stops being a racist dickhead. And so that's kind of also a subplot in Final Fantasy X. Not only the bigotry for backgrounds and religions, but also for the races of people. But Seymour gets mistreated as a child growing up. He winds up locked in one of these temples as a kid. Has a whole mental breakdown. His mom ends up giving her life so that he can master the ultimate summon anima. And in so doing, it kind of fractures his psyche, and yeah, it's there's a whole thing. Seymour's just he in his mind has the best intentions, but is actually insane. As most good villains, in my opinion, should be to make a compelling villain. They believe they're doing the right thing. And finally, for our legendary creatures, we have Sin, Unending Cataclysm. 5 green blue for a legendary Leviathan avatar. 5/5 with flying and trample. So he's got that flample. And as Sin enters, you remove all counters from any number of artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. Not just yours. It can be opponents too. Sin enters with X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is twice the number of counters removed this way. This card is a finisher by itself. It's got flying and trample. If you have 5 counters amongst only your permanents, not even looking at opponent stuff, right? You remove 5 counters from your stuff, you put 10 counters on Sin, you now have a flying 15/15. This can just straight up kill people. You likely will have a lot more counters than that in this deck, though. And when Sin dies, you put its counters on target creature you control, then shuffle this card into its owner's library. So even if you kill Sin, it just comes back. Yo, what's up, Elf? How's it going? Sorry, I didn't see you there. I don't have... I keep encountering an issue on my mobile camera where it's not flipping the camera around. So I have the screen for my camera faced away from me so that y'all can see the cards. So, my bad I didn't see you there. Welcome on in, friend. Welcome, welcome. There we go. But yeah, so thematically, Sin... The whole pilgrimage thing is kind of... very storied. Ooh, thank you so much for that 7-stream streak, Elf. I appreciate you. Thank you, thank you. Sin is very storied to be unkillable in Final Fantasy X. All of these summoners make this pilgrimage, right? And ultimately they have to give the life of one of their guardians to get anima, which is the only way to defeat Sin. But in defeating him, the summoner then becomes Sin, right? And it's a whole thing. Effectively, Braska didn't do that, but Tidus's dad, Jekt, did. So he when the final summon defeats Sin, that summon becomes Sin effectively and kills the summoner. Is how it works essentially. And so they've done this a bunch against Sin. And every time Sin goes away, there's a time called the Calm, and then Sin inevitably comes back. and then another guardian has to, or another summoner has to take up the pilgrimage, do the same thing to give them times of calm. So that is ultimately the plot of Final Fantasy X, is this guy kills everybody, or tries to, and the good guys have to find a way to kill it temporarily so that the good guys then come back as the bad guy. Makes sense? Glad you're coming along with me. I know it sounds silly explaining it, but I promise the story to Final Fantasy X is rad. It is one of my favorites. It was my favorite Final Fantasy, actually, up until I played Final Fantasy VI. That then became my favorite story. And I think many Final Fantasy fans would agree. Next we have Altered Ego X2 Green Blue for a shapeshifter that is a 0/0. This spell can't be countered, and you may have this creature enter as a copy of any creature on the battlefield except it enters with X additional +1/+1 counters on it. So, at base, it's 4 mana for a clone, right? Comes in, it becomes a copy of anything on the battlefield that can't be countered. But you could always make it larger by adding more mana into the value of X there. Shown here in the art is the second summon that you get, Ifrit, who is always one of my favorite summons to use. He's a big fire beast. I like him a lot. But Ifrit already appeared in the set, in 2 forms actually, because you have Ifrit from Final Fantasy VIII as Summon GF or Guardian Force Ifrit, and also appears on the backside of Clive, who we saw in the Wandering Minstrel deck. So Ifrit, being a fire summon, usually has a red color identity. Well, this deck notably does not have red in it, so you can't exactly include Ifrit in the squad. But I like that they made Altered Ego with Ifrit's art so that you still get one of the core summons in your deck. Next up, we have Fathom Mage. 2 green blue for a human wizard, 1/1 with Evolve. Whenever a creature you control enters, if that creature has greater power or toughness than this creature, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And whenever a +1/+1 counter is put on this creature, you may draw a card. It's card draw, it makes itself big. It's just a good overall piece to have in a counters deck. This, of course, is a reprint. So all of these creatures that you see that aren't legendary for the most part, these are all going to be reprints from Magic's past with new art for Final Fantasy. Next we have Tireless Tracker. 2 and a green for a human scout, 3/2 with Landfall. Whenever a land enters, whenever a land you control enters, investigate. You make a clue token. You can pay 2 and sacrifice a clue to draw a card. And whenever you sacrifice a clue, you put a 1/1 counter on this creature. So it kind of fuels itself in getting bigger, just like Fathom Mage. Shown here, we have, that is not Riku, but is one of the Albed. It might be Riku, actually, looking at it. But it's one of the Albed that Riku is with, who have been following Yuna. And at one point in the game, they kidnap Yuna to get her off the pilgrimage because, like I said, Riku is Yuna's cousin and doesn't want her to die in the pilgrimage. So the Albed kind of hatched this plan to kidnap her in order to try and save her. Next, we have Generous Patron. 2 and a green for an Elf Advisor, 1/4, with when this creature enters, support 2. So support is, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 other target creatures. Note, it is not 2 1/1 counters on one creature. Support 2. Support is you put a 1/1 counter on a thing. The number is up to how many targets you can do. So that's how support works. Also, whenever you put one or more counters on a creature you don't control, draw a card. So, worth noting that support can target any creature. So it is kind of nice that you could have this enter, put a +1/+1 counter on one of your creatures, and then put a +1/+1 counter on an opponent's creature to draw a card. Next, we have Incubation Druid, one of my favorite mana dorks in a counter deck. 1 and a green for an Elf Druid, 0/2, with tap, add 1 mana of any type that a land you control could produce. If this creature has a +1/+1 counter on it, add 3 mana of that type instead. And for 3 green, has adapt 3. So if this creature has no 1/1 counters on it, you put 3 1/1 counters on it. Now, mind you, it will turn it into a 3/5. But typically what you end up doing with Incubation Druid is you have other means to put counters on your creatures that are way cheaper than 5 mana, and you just use those. And, I guess I should... Generous Patron is a attendee of a Blitzball game. Blitzball being the major sports event in the world of Spira. And Incubation Druid is just one of the Guado. Next, we have Rampant Rejuvenator, 3 and a green for a Plant Hydra, 0/0, with this creature enters with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. When this creature dies, search your library for up to X basic land cards, where X is this creature's power, and put them onto the battlefield. Doesn't say tapped. Then shuffle. So, fun little ramp piece here. You put a bunch of 1/1 counters on this thing, and then you use a kill spell on it, or you keep sending it into the red zone, forcing your opponents to have to block. And then when they do kill it, you get a bunch of lands. It's pretty great. Shown here, this is... I don't think it's the King Ochu. I think this is just a standard Ochu in Final Fantasy X. But the first time you do encounter one is in the middle of this walkway, and it's one of the scariest encounters because you see it in the walkway that you have to go through. And so you know it's coming. It's not just a random encounter. And it's a very tough fight for the level that you're at when you first come upon the Ochu. Next, we have Bane of Progress, 4 green for a 2/2 elemental. When this creature enters, destroy all artifacts and enchantments, yours and opponents. You blow them all up. But you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature for each permanent destroyed this way. So it's going to blow up every artifact and enchantment, but for 6 mana, this thing potentially becomes huge. Bane of Progress shown here. This is one of the boss fights you encounter through the game. It is what's called a Sin spawn. Basically, Sin has these pieces of itself that it shoots off to terrorize humanity, acting almost like a herald, because Sin, as the flavor text says, Sin always returns for its spawn. So it will leave these Sin spawn places to harass the denizens in the area, and then Sin comes to get its spawn and finish devouring whatever is left. Next, we have Gyre Sage, 1 and a green for an Elf Druid, 1/2 with Evolve. We've seen Evolve once previously already. Whenever creature you control enters, if it has greater power or toughness, this gets a 1/1 counter. Gyre Sage here, pretty decent mana dork because it taps to add a green for each +1/+1 counter on this creature. Shown here is just another one of the Guado that you encounter. Next we have Duskshell Crawler, 1 and a green for a 0/3 insect. When this creature enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. It could be itself, so it could enter as a 1/4 for 2. And each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has trample. So, if you have something better to put that +1/+1 counter on, great. Pop it on that, and now it has trample because of Duskshell Crawler. This is, I forget what these enemies are called, but they're heavily armored enemies that you have to have a character with a heavy hitting weapon like Orin attack in order to deal basically any damage to them. Next we have Forgotten Ancient, 3 and a green for a 0/3 elemental with whenever a player casts a spell, you may put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may move any number of +1/+1 counters from this creature onto other creatures. This is my favorite way to get counters on all your stuff. You cast this, and then a couple other spells, you get some counters on it. You pass the turn, your opponent's going to wind up casting spells. It's going to get huge. On your upkeep, you just distribute your counters amongst all your stuff, and now your Tidus is online for having the ability to proliferate if any of your creatures deal damage. Pictured here in the art is, I believe this is one of the beings you fight in the Far Plane. When Lord Jiskel Guado shows up, they're like, quick, you gotta send him before he turns into a monster. And then a big monster spirit thing comes up and you have to kill it. Next up we have Scholar of New Horizons, 1 and a white for a 1/1 human scout. This creature enters with a +1/+1 counter on it. So actually it's a 2/2 when it enters. And has tap, remove a counter from a permanent you control. Search your library for a Plains card. Doesn't say basic. And reveal it. If an opponent controls more lands than you, you may put that card onto the battlefield tapped. If you don't put that card onto the battlefield, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So this is just a convenient, repeatable tutor. It can remove the 1/1 counter from itself, but because it's from a permanent you control, you just remove any kind of counter and go get a Plains. So if you have any dual lands that have the Plains type on them, you can go get those. And if an opponent has more lands than you, cool, you get to put it directly into play. And if not, well, hey, you've got it in your hand, and now you can hit your land drop for the turn. Oh, and this is, I think this is Brother, is his name. He's one of the Albed that's part of Riku's squad. Next, we have Sunscorched Regent, 3 white for a 4/3 dragon with flying. And whenever an opponent casts a spell, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, and you gain 1 life. So this is a boss fight that you go through. It's the dragon Evray. It is you encounter him in Bavel at one point, and it's a really annoying boss fight because he's flying. So you have to use like Waka and use magic to be able to hit him. And likewise, Sunscorched Region is a very annoying card for your opponents to have to deal with, because anytime anybody casts anytime any of them casts anything, it gets bigger and you're gaining life. Next we have the Chocobo Knights, 3 and a white for a 3/3 human knight. Whenever you attack creatures you control with counters on them, gain double strike until end of turn. So this, I misspoke. This is a new card. This is not a reprint from Magic. This is a mechanically new card. But the Chocobo Knights, you encounter a few points throughout the game. You just see them riding around on Chocobos. And they are part of the Yevon army. Next we have Luminous Broodmoth, 2 white for a 3/4 insect with flying, and whenever a creature you control without flying dies, return it to the battlefield. Return it to under its owner's control. I can't speak today, my goodness. You return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. There we go. With a flying counter on it. So, again, Tidus cares about stuff having counters. Doesn't have to be 1/1 counters. If you have anything with a counter on it, deal damage to your opponent, you get to draw a card and proliferate. So, Luminous Broodmoth is a great way to do that because it has flying, you swing with something, if it dies, it's coming back with a flying counter, and now it has a counter and can trigger Tidus's second ability. The Luminous Broodmoth shown here, this is like the very first enemy you encounter in the game's opening tutorial fight. They're like sin scales that it shoots off and turn into little flying cockroach things. Next, we have the Grateful Apparition, 1 and a white for a 1/1 spirit with flying. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, proliferate. Just proliferate on a stick. This little spirit child you see throughout the game turns out is the Faith, or the Spirit, also called Faith in Final Fantasy X, that grants Yuna Bahamut, who we might be seeing later. But this kid keeps appearing to Tidus and kind of hassling him. Next up we have the Chasm Skulker, 2 and a blue for a 1/1 squid horror. Whenever you draw a card, you put a 1/1 counter on this creature. And when this creature dies, you make X 1/1 blue squid creature tokens with Island Walk, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on this creature. Island Walk is they can't be blocked as long as the defending player controls an island. Doesn't have to be a basic island. If they have a land type island, those squids are unblockable. The Chasm Skulker shown here, this is the first real boss fight that you encounter in the game. When Tidus gets sucked through a space butt because Orin let him... He's from a town called Xanarkand, and Sin shows up. Tidus is a blitzball player, and his dad's friend Orin is there as the town's getting sucked into this giant portal in the sky, and Sin's destroying it, and he's like, "No, it's your time, it's your story," and grabs Tidus and throws him into the portal, and then Tidus wakes up in the land of Spira. He wakes up at a destroyed temple and comes upon the Albed, who don't speak his language. So he doesn't understand what they want him to do, and so they send him on a mission into this underwater place. And this Albed girl joins him, who turns out to be Riku, and they have to fight this big squid thing that's super annoying. Like a Chasm Skulker is super annoying. And our final non-saga creature. We have everybody's favorite infinite combo piece, Walking Ballista. XX for a 0/0 artifact creature construct. This creature enters with X +1/+1 counters on it. You can pay 4 mana to put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, and at instant speed, you can remove a +1/+1 from this creature to deal 1 damage to any target. So, if X equals 1, then you're paying 2 mana for a 1/1, or 4 mana for a 2/2, and so on, right? But this card is part of a 3-card infinite combo that comes stock in the deck. That's right, dear viewers. Walking Ballista goes infinite? Who knew? This card is always broken. This card has a reputation for being a problematic card, because if you see Walking Ballista hit the table, you have to kill it on sight. Otherwise, your opponent will probably win that turn. It is theoretically possible to win the game on turn 2 because of Walking Ballista and Gata and Luzu. And let's have a view at out of sequence. We're going to look at a card because it's now come up in conversation. And Hardened Scales. So these 3 cards make up an infinite combo in this deck. Hardened Scales costs 1 green mana. It's an enchantment that says if 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, that many +1 +1/+1 counters are put on it instead, right? Gata and Luzu we talked about have flash. Say if a thing would be dealt damage, instead you negate that damage and put that many 1/1 counters. And Walking Ballista, you can just remove counters to deal damage to any target. So, how this works, if you have exactly, I'm trying to remember, it's, you need to have at least a Plains, a Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Hardened Scales, Gata and Luzu, Walking Ballista, I think that's it. Or we'll say 2 lands. There you go. You get 2 lands, Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Hardened Scales, Gata and Luzu, Walking Ballista, right? So, turn 1, you go land, Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Hardened Scales. Pass the turn, goes to opponent's turns, comes back to you. You play your second land, hopefully a Plains. You can then Walking Ballista, X equals 2. Right? So you have to pay 4 mana. So your 2 lands and your 2 from Soul Ring. Nope, I already did that wrong. No, it's just X equals 1, right, because we have Hardened Scales out. So you tap Soul Ring, X equals 1. Enters with a 1/1 counter on it, except Hardened Scales says it enters with an additional 1, so it's going to enter as a 2/2. Then we use our land, our 2 lands, and Arcane Signet to cast Gata and Luzu, right? Gata and Luzu says target creature you control, if it would be dealt damage, prevent it, add that many 1/1 counters. We target Walking Ballista. So now Walking Ballista, anytime it's dealt damage, we ignore that damage and put that many 1/1 counters on it. Except Hardened Scales is going to put 2 1/1 counters on it for every 1 counter we would put, right? So you have a 2/2 Walking Ballista. Remove a counter. Have Walking Ballista target itself. It deals the damage, except it doesn't. It's negated because of Gata and Luzu. So it says, okay, instead put a +1/+1 counter. Hardened Scales sees that 1/1 counter, says put 2 on there. So we went down to a 1/1, and then went up to a 3/3. We remove 1 counter, targeting Walking Ballista again. It sees that 1 damage, says no. 2 1/1 counters in its place, it's now 4/4. And you see how that works now. You then target itself. say 10,000 times, and every time you do it, it's getting 2 1/1 counters in place of the one you're removing. Once you have a 10,000 walking ballista, you then remove 40 counters from it and target an opponent and kill them. And then you do that again for the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And there you go. That is how you can win the game on turn 2 with a perfect 7 cards. Now, are you realistically doing that? Probably not. You have to have the absolute stone cold nuts of an opening hand, but it is theoretically possible to do. All right, moving on into our enchantment creatures and enchantments in the deck. We're going to see some summons. So, summon Yojimbo here costs 3 and a white for an enchantment Saga Samurai, 5/5 with vigilance. Sagas, of course, are as the saga enters, after your draw and after your draw step, you add a lore counter. After it gets to its final chapter number of counters, you sacrifice this. Now, they've recently updated how sagas work. Effectively, it does not enter with those counters. It enters at 0, and then you place 1. So, effects like Doubling Season do put 2 counters on it now. And also, if you remove the saga ability, it used to be with sagas, if you could blank a saga, it would just instantly die. They've undone that now. So if you get it to 0 counters, it's just still whatever creature it is. So this is why I really like the saga creatures in this, because of Tidus's ability to move counters, right? So Yojimbo here, Chapter 1, you exile target artifact, enchantment, or tapped creature an opponent controls. You just remove something. If we then go to combat, Tidus says, move a counter from a creature you control onto another creature. Well, lore counters don't do anything on non-saga creatures, so I can remove that one lore counter and put it on Tidus, and then go to combat. Tidus now has a counter, and if he hits, well, now I get to draw a card and proliferate. We move to my next turn. Oh, Yojimbo has no counters on him, so we add 1, and it's going to trigger Chapter 1 again. And you can just keep doing that. So you just move the lore counter off, you'll go to your next turn, you'll add another, and so on. The proliferate thing is handy because if you need to get this through to a further chapter, you can do that with the proliferate. So instead of moving a counter, you could instead, say, have something else hit, draw your card off Tidus, and then proliferate. You can proliferate your lore counter to 2 and trigger this next ability. Because anytime you add however many lore counters, it will trigger that chapter. So the summon creatures are super sweet in this deck. So now that we've explained that, Chapter 2 and 3 on Yojimbo, until your next turn, creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 for each of those creatures. So you get a ghostly prison effect. Next is finally Chapter 4, create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of opponents who control a creature with power 4 or greater. So this can ramp you in your mana. So Yojimbo is one of the secret summons you can get in the game. He's also one of my favorite summons because he's got this cute little dog, Daigoro, that comes with him. And Yojimbo works slightly different in that in order to get him to do anything in game, you have to pay him gil, right? He's a mercenary. So if you give him enough gil, he'll actually use his Zen Tetsusuken ability, which can instantly kill any enemy in the game. Or, lower levels, he sends Daigoro to run up and attack them. Or he can summon magic. He does a bunch of stuff. Yojimbo's just super cool. He's a dope summon. Probably my favorite in Final Fantasy overall. Next up, we have Summon Ixion, 2 and a white for a 3/3 enchantment Saga Unicorn with First Strike, and has Arrow Spark at Chapter 1, which is exile target creature an opponent controls until this saga leaves the battlefield. So this is actually my favorite repeatable one with Tidus removing the lore counters, because you just keep doing Arrow Spark and just O-ringing your opponent's stuff. Then Chapter 2, you put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures you control and gain 2 life, and then you do that again in Chapter 3. At which point this would go away, and then your opponents get all their stuff back. But if you can just remove blockers, it's pretty great. Next, we have Summon Valifor, 4 and a blue for an enchantment Saga Drake, 5/4 with flying. It's always wild that Valifor was considered a drake, because I always thought it was a big bird, like a phoenix. But I guess it's a drake, canonically. Chapter 1, I have a sneeze coming, excuse me. Excuse me, goodness bless. Chapter 1, Sonic Wings. Each opponent chooses a creature with the greatest mana value among creatures they control. Return those creatures to their owner's hands. This is also a super fun repeatable. Chapters 2, 3, and 4, tap up to 1 target creature and put a stun counter on it. You're just removing blockers from your opponents. Pretty dope. Valifor is the first summon you get in Final Fantasy X, which is basically when Tidus meets Yuna. She comes out of the Faith having just gained Valifor as a summon. The next one you get is Ifrit, who we saw on Altered Ego. Then you get Ixion, the Thunder Unicorn. Then you get Shiva, and then ultimately Bahamut. And then you get into your secret summons, Yojimbo, the Magus Sisters, and Anima. Speaking of the Magus Sisters, we have Summon Magus Sisters, 4 and a blue for an enchantment creature Saga Fairy, 5/5 with haste. This is one of the few Saga creatures that can attack the turn they come down. So Magus Sisters work slightly different. They have 3 chapters, but it's random at what they do. So chapters 1 through 3, you choose one of these 3 things at random. Either combine powers to put 3 +1/+1 counters on target creature. Defense, put a shield counter on target creature and you gain 3 life. Or fight. This creature fights up to 1 target creature an opponent controls. So you're getting a 5/5 for 5 with haste. That could become an 8/8. Because you could put the 3 1/1 counters on itself if that's what you end up getting. You could also put a shield counter on it. So then if the next time it would be destroyed, you just remove the shield counter. Or you get a fight spell out of it, which could remove an opponent's creature, and then they can swing in. But mind you, all of those things can also go on other creatures. So pretty decent. I do love the flavor of how it's random, because the Magus Sisters in-game don't listen to you. You have these kind of nebulous options that you can choose from, and depending on which one you choose, they will select a potential action from a list of things that they do. But you can't make them do anything. And also, a fun little reference to Final Fantasy IV, because the Magus Sisters are actually originally encountered as bosses in that game. But they weren't insects in that. Or fairies, I guess, is what they're quantified as here. Next, we have Bread for the Hunt. 1 green-blue for an enchantment with whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. It's just good draw. Just good draw for a counter deck. I have used Bread for the Hunt in so many of my counter decks to draw so many cards. Because this is whenever a creature with a 1/1 counter. So it does it for each of them. Also, this is showcasing a pivotal story moment where your compatriot Kimari he's being bullied by these Biran and Yankee, these two Ronso that constantly make fun of him for not having a horn. His horn got broken off by Biran in a fight, and so they call him Hornless. He finally stands up to them around the mid to 2/3 of the way through the game and beats their ass. And it's a great little boss fight. Next up, we have Inexorable Tide, 3 blue-blue for an enchantment with whenever you cast a spell, proliferate. You just get to choose any number of permanents or players, add an extra counter that they have of whatever kind that they already have there. This is moments before disaster. Inexorable Tide is the moment that Sin attacks Xanarkand at the game's opening. So, Tidus is a blitzball player. He's in the blitzball stadium, which is this big, like, watery sphere. And he sees a big thing rise up out of the ocean and starts shooting these Sin scales out of it. And starts laying waste to the town. Next, we have one of my favorite card arts in the set. Not my favorite card art, but one of. We will be seeing my favorite card art momentarily. This is Together Forever, white for an enchantment. When this enchantment enters, support 2, so you get to put a 1/1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. You can pay 1, choose target creature with a counter on it. When that creature dies this turn, return that card to its owner's hand. This showcases the Tidus and Yuna kiss in the game, which is a super sweet moment that brings me to tears every time to this day when I see it. Next, we have Summoner's Sending, 1 and a white for an enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, you may exile target creature card from a graveyard. If you do, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying, and put a 1/1 counter on it if the exiled card's mana value was 4 or greater. So this is the Yuna dancing to send spirits to the far plane that I mentioned earlier. Next, we have Resourceful Defense, 2 and a white for an enchantment. Whenever a permanent you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on target permanent you control. So again, we get another one of those kind of, I've forgotten the name now, the Ozolith effects, or like Yuna has, where it's, did the thing die? Cool, put its counters on something else. In the case of this, it leaves the battlefield, so even if you bounce it to hand, you still get to put those counters on something else. And mind you, again, because it is putting those counters on something, if you have a doubling season, you do double all those counters. Also, for 4 and a white, move any number of counters from target permanent you control onto a second target permanent you control. So, something of yours leaves. If it had counters, you put it on something else. You then can pay 5 mana, move it from that onto a different thing. You just keep moving them around. It's great. Shown here in this scene is, I believe this is the argument that Waka is having with Tidus for wanting to join the pilgrimage with Yuna, because he gets thrown into the faith against his will, and is like, well, why don't I just become a guardian? And Waka's like, no way, you shouldn't even be down here. And he's like, but I wanna. And then Yuna's like, yeah, he can come with. And everybody's reluctantly agreeing. Next we have fight rigging. 2 and a blue for an enchantment with Hideaway 5. So when this enchantment enters, you get to look at the top 5 cards of your library. You exile one of those cards face down with this enchantment, and then the rest go onto the bottom of your library in a random order. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then, if you control a creature with power 7 or greater, you get to play the exiled card for free. You don't pay its mana cost. Mind you, even after you've played the Hideaway thing, this still just continues to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control at the start of combat. And because of how your triggers work, you could stack it in such a way that fight rigging will put that counter on a thing, and Tidus can then move that counter to something else if you need to. So, for example, if you have Waka, who wants you to have placed a counter on him this turn so that he can put a counter on all your stuff, you could put the counter on Waka, which will then trick that trigger into going off at the end of your turn. But you could then move that 1/1 counter off of Waka onto something else of yours with Tidus. So then you're still going to get a +1/+1 counter on all your stuff from Waka at the end of turn. It's the synergy between a bunch of the cards in this is just super sweet. I like it. And fight rigging here is showing when the Albed kidnap Yuna, it's during a major blitzball game that Waka is playing in as captain of the Besaid Aurochs against the Luca Goers, and they are pretty solidly losing at that point. And then, there's a whole heroic speech, and potentially they can win that. It is possible to win that game of blitzball. I've never done it because I hate playing blitzball. Next up, we have Path of Discovery. 3 and a green for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control enters, it explores. So exploring is you reveal the top card of your library. You put that card into your hand if it's a land. Otherwise, if it's anything but a land, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on the creature that just entered. And you can put that card back on top of your deck or put it in your graveyard. So it's a great way to get some card selection if you need it. Get some counters on your stuff. Or if you're putting a bunch of things into play, you just leave that card on top, and then everything that's entering is all coming in with 1/1 counters. Next, we have Sphere Grid, one of the most busted Magic cards that they released in 2025. Sphere Grid is 1 and a green for an enchantment that says whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a 1/1 counter on that creature. Doesn't sound that bad, right? You hit with something, it gets bigger. That's pretty decent. Then it has unlockability. Creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them have reach and trample. So all of your stuff gets to put 1/1 counters on itself. Tidus sees those 1/1 counters on them, says, hey, they have 1/1 counters, they dealt damage. Draw a card and proliferate. So now they're getting an extra 1/1 counter on the proliferate, and you drew a card, and now they're all trample reach creatures. This card is nuts. Also, the Sphere Grid is why, mechanically, I really like Final Fantasy. I think for its game mechanics, Final Fantasy X might be my favorite, even though story-wise, I think 6 is still my favorite. But I really liked how the sphere grid worked, because you could lead any character into any kind of build, right? Or if you just endlessly did grinding, you could get every node activated for every character on the sphere grid and just become a god with your entire party. Next, we have Blitzball Stadium, X and a blue for artifact that when it enters, you support X. So you can just pay a single blue and it supports 0. But for 2 mana, you'll get to support 1, so you get to put a 1/1 counter on one target creature, or it scales, therein. And go for the goal. 3 and tap until end of turn, target creature gains. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card for each kind of counter on it, and it can't be blocked this turn. So this is a great way to trigger your Tidus ability of drawing cards and proliferating. So this lets you draw a card for each kind of counter on it, which gives you another reason to move those lore counters off your saga creatures. Or put flying counters on them with Luminous Broodmoth. Any kinds of counters. You want to just have all the counters on things, because you get to draw a card for each of those counters. And because it's unblockable, Tidus then lets you draw a card with it. And then you also get to proliferate, adding one more of each of those counters that you could then move around with Tidus. Blitzball Stadium is pretty fun. This is the Besaid Stadium. Or no, this is the Lucas Stadium, excuse me. That we see in Fight Rigging. Next, we have our Mana Rocks, the classics. You know them, you love them. Arcane Signet, 2 mana artifact, taps for a mana of any color in your commander's color identity. This is Jecht's necklace. That's Tidus's dad. When Jecht became Sin, he gave the necklace to Orin to give to Tidus. Tidus then wears this necklace of his dad's, even though he hates his dad. They have a complicated anime relationship. They kind of hate each other, but they don't. But his dad's a hard ass, but not really. It's a whole thing. Next, we have Soul Ring, 1 mana artifact, taps for 2 colorless. The Soul Ring, pictured here, is the save sphere in Final Fantasy X. They also are memory spheres. Like, they look pretty functionally the same. Daddy issues, but not really, but also yes. Yeah, exactly, Elf, exactly. Tidus is daddy issues, but not really, but kind of, but also not, but yes. It's anime. And one of my favorite, actually, quite possibly my favorite mana rock that they included in this deck, the Everflowing Chalice. It is 0 mana for an artifact with multi-kicker 2. So for every 2 mana you pay, you get to put you get to do this any number of times. So this artifact enters with a charge counter on it for each time it was kicked. So if you spend 2 mana, it comes in with a charge counter on it. Right? Why is that important? Because it taps for a colorless for each charge counter on this artifact. Well, because we have a commander that proliferates, we could spend 2 mana for this single colorless mana artifact, then we could easily proliferate the charge counters on it, making it then tap for 2, and then 3, and 4, and so on, and this can get out of hand quickly as a mana rock. And pictured here, the Everflowing Chalice is the sphere pedestal that you have to use to beat the faith puzzles to get your summons in the game. Alright, that is all of our artifacts and enchantments. We're going to move on now to our instants and sorceries. So up first we have Endless Detour, green, white, blue for an instant. The owner of target spell, non-land permanent, or card in a graveyard puts it on their choice of the top or bottom of their library. So you just get decent removal for something, right? It can act like a counter spell because they want to cast something. You respond with this. They then choose to top or bottom it. If they choose top, well, hey, they're going to be having to draw it to cast it again. If they choose bottom, that card's probably never being seen again. Non-land permanent, it could just be removal or get something off the board for a turn. Or card in a graveyard, that's just great against mill strategies. Opponents trying to mill you out. They go to make you mill your last card. You just, cool, I'm going to, in response, put this card from my graveyard on the bottom of my library, draw it for my turn, and now I don't die. Shown in the art here is the Thunder Plains that you encounter, which has the worst minigame of all time, where you have to dodge lightning strikes. And Riku's fear of the lightning that happens on the Thunder Plane. And you have to dodge 200 lightning strikes sequentially in order without missing a single one if you want to try to get Lulu's Celestial Ultimate Weapon. I've never done it because ain't nobody got time for that. Next, we have Path to Exile, classic removal. 1 white for an instant, exile target creature. Its owner may search their library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. This is the moment I was talking about earlier, where Orin grabs Tidus and throws him into the sky butt, which is how he winds up on Spira. Next, we have Protection Magic. 1 and a green. For an instant, put a shield counter on each of up to 3 target creatures. So, if a creature with a shield counter would be dealt damage or destroyed, you remove a shield counter from it instead. So, the next time it would receive damage or be destroyed, instead it lives. And we see Yuna, Tidus, and Kamari all getting, I believe it's Barrier cast on them, if I remember right. Next, we have Destroy Evil. 1 and a white for an instant. Choose 1. Destroy target creature with toughness 4 or greater, or destroy target enchantment. This is the moment that they defeat Maester Seymour, and Yuna starts to send him. After he was being a creep. Listen, it's a whole thing. Next, we have an offer. Sorry, let me say this right. An offer you can't refuse. An offer you can't refuse is 1 blue mana for an instant. Counter target non-creature spell. Its controller creates 2 treasure tokens. This is the moment I was talking about earlier, where Tidus washes up in this rundown temple and encounters the Albed, led by Riku. And this is when they basically say, hey, you're going to go down into the sunken ruin, you're going to find this thing for us and bring it back. Otherwise, we're going to leave you to die in the cold and starve in this decrepit temple. That's the offer that he can't refuse. Next, we have Pull from Tomorrow. X blue for an instant to draw X cards, then discard a card. Seen here, we have one of those memory spheres I was talking about, featuring Jack, Tidus's dad. So they are, it's the moment that he finds out that his dad is Sin, and why he wound up here. So Sin attacked his hometown of Xanarkand. Orin threw him in the sky butt. And now he's here on Spira. He got pulled into all this world because his dad turns out is a big giant whale monster. Next we have the most mimetic moment in all of Final Fantasy history, which actually is a really sweet scene. It's been kind of memed out of context for far too long. But this is the ha 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 laugh. It gets, you can see even in the flavor text, we have ha 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 ha. There it is. There's the laughs. Yo, what's up, Paragon? How's it going? Welcome on in, buddy. Welcome, welcome. Let me get you some shout outs here right quick. There we go. But yes, this is a... it's been memed on forever. It's actually a very sweet scene in the game where Tidus is having a hard time because, of course, he's in a world that he doesn't recognize. He's constantly frustrated and doesn't know how to deal with being in this strange place. And is super upset. Now, mind you, he doesn't know at this point that Yuna's pilgrimage ends in her dying. Right? So, they're at this overlook, and Yuna tells him, well, sometimes you just, even when you're sad, even when you're upset, sometimes you just gotta laugh. And that's how you stop from being sad. And he's like, what if I don't, what if I can't laugh? She's like, then you make yourself laugh. And so he does that cringy laugh on purpose until they both start laughing legitimately. So again, very sweet scene, but very often used out of context. But one of my favorite scenes overall in the game. Not my favorite, but one of. My favorite scene we will see soon. So this card is Inspiring Call. 2 and a green for an instant. Draw a card for each creature you control with +1/+1 counter on it, and those creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. Which I love that that's the one that they made, having the ha 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 ha. Because that's a perfect counteract to your opponent's board wiping. Your opponent's got to blow everything up. You cast Inspiring Call. All my stuff is indestructible, and I'm going to draw a bunch of cards. Cool. Everybody lost everything except me, and I've got a full grip now. Next, we have Yuna's Whistle. Another one among my favorite scenes. When Tidus teaches Yuna how to whistle, because she never knew. And it becomes a story thing that breaks my heart at the end of the game. Yuna's Whistle here is 1 green for an instant. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Put that card into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. When you reveal a creature card this way, put X +1/+1 counters on target creature you control, where X is the mana value of that card. So, I once resolved this with Sin being the first creature that I revealed, who's 7 mana. So I just got to put Sin in my hand, put 7 1/1 counters on something, cast Sin, remove the 7 1/1 counters from that thing, put twice the number of counters on Sin for 14, and he starts at 5. I had a 19/19 Flying Trample Sin. It was gross. This card is very powerful because normally when you have these dig cards like this, it'll say, you know, oh, reveal 5 cards, right? Reveal 3, right? And you can get a land or a creature. This is, no, you reveal until you hit a creature, and hopefully it's something big. Next, we have Collective Effort. 1 white for a sorcery with Escalate. Tap an untapped creature you control. So you can pay this cost for each mode chosen beyond the first. So it does have 3 modes. So you can pay 3 mana and tap 2 untapped creatures you control to choose all 3, right? So choose 1 or more. Destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. destroy target enchantment, or put a +1/+1 counter on each creature target player controls. Most commonly, I wind up just casting this for the put a 1/1 on all my stuff. The artwork shown here is the scene where Tidus and crew are sliding down these big giant cables from the airship to where Seymour Guado, who is a ghost at this point, he is a spirit, has kidnapped Yuna and wants to marry her. Yeah, and she agrees to go with him, effectively because she realizes that she's gonna kill him to stop him from... It's a whole thing. He wants to become Sin, so he wants to marry Yuna so that she sacrifices him to become her final summon, so that he can become Sin, so that he can destroy the world, because he's effectively hates everything. He's a nihilist now. And so he wants to marry... Apparently marrying Yuna is the only way for him to be able to do that, I guess. They never really explain that part, why he has to marry her. But we get to see Yuna in a pretty wedding dress, so that's something. And we get to see this dope moment where they all go sliding down these cables. Next up, we have Damning Verdict, 3 white for a sorcery. Destroy all creatures with no counters on them. So this can be an asymmetric board wipe in your deck if you have counters on all your stuff. This is the moment where, effectively, because of what happened with Seymour, they decide that Yuna's in big trouble, and that they're traitors to Yevon. And so they find her guilty and effectively throw her in a monster dungeon. Next up, we have a game changer in a pre-con. Mind you, when this deck came out, Farewell had not been added to the game changer list yet. It is now. This is... Every time I've seen an art for Farewell, I always absolutely adore it. They printed this in the David Tennant Doctor Who pre-con. It's the moment that David Tennant regenerates. It's a heartbreaking art that I love. There's also the art for Farewell from Kamigawa, the set that it was printed in, that has like the paper doll things. I love that art. I love this art. It's also one of our emotes for this month, the back hug. That one there, for those watching in the chat. Yeah, this is effectively at the end of the game. Tidus has to go back home, and Yuna has to say goodbye. And this is them saying goodbye. It's their farewell. Farewell is 4 white for a sorcery. Choose 1 or more. Exile all artifacts, exile all creatures, exile all enchantments, and exile all graveyards. It's a board wipe. It removes everything. It starts the game back to 0 effectively, except for lands. That's why it got put on the game changer list. But I still really like the artwork for it. Next, we have Promise of Loyalty. This is the scene we see at the opening of the game, and where we got the name for the Wandering Minstrel deck that I showed off a few weeks back. Listen to my story. This may be our last chance. That is the opening line that Tidus says at the very start of the game. Promise of Loyalty here costs 4 and a white for a sorcery. Each player puts a vow counter on a creature they control and sacrifices the rest. Each of those creatures cannot attack you or a planeswalker you control for as long as it has a vow counter on it. Mind you, we also are in a deck that can move counters around and have other things that care about the different types of counters, like Blitzball Stadium. So that vow counter could turn into more card draw for us. Next, we have 3 visits. Classic ramp in green. 1 and a green for a sorcery. Search your library for a forest card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Note, it does not say basic, and it does not say tapped. So for 2 mana, you can go get any of your forest dual lands and put it directly into play untapped, if it's the kind that enters untapped. Next, we have Yuna's Decision, a variation of my favorite art. My favorite scene in the game. Yuna's decision is 3 and a green for a sorcery. Choose one. Continue the pilgrimage, which is sacrifice a creature. If you do, draw a card. Then you may put a creature card and or a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Doesn't matter how big the thing is. Or find another way. Return 1 or 2 target permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. It's just good versatility. You can use this to get you lands back from your graveyard. You can use this to draw a card, so this replaces itself, right? It's a cantrip because it draws a card. You put a creature into play that is potentially better than the thing you sacrificed, because there's no limit on what you could put into play. And you put a land straight into play untapped, so you get ramp. Like, this card is nuts. And this is the moment in the game where this is another one of the emotes we have, the Yuna crying emote. It is one of the most touching scenes in the game, because Yuna, like, Tidus just finds out about the pilgrimage and how it ends with Yuna is going to have to die, and in so doing, one of her guardians has to as well, if they want to beat Sin. And she finally has a moment where the facade breaks, and she breaks down and actually has a moment of, I think she's supposed to be like 15, 16 in Final Fantasy X. This young girl who has the weight and hopes of the entire world placed on her shoulders, who's basically being told, hey, you have to walk through hell and fight these monsters, and at the end, you and somebody you care about are both gonna die, but we need you to do it to save the world. Have fun. Yeah, it's my favorite scene in the game. And finally, one of the rare occasions where we get the double green ramp that gets you non-basics, because we just had 3 visits. Now we have Farseek. So 1 and a green sorcery. You search your library for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain and put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Mind you, doesn't say basic. So you could get your plains forest or plains island. You could get your island forest or island plains. You can get any of your dual lands you need from this deck and put them directly into play. And here we see Mei Chen, who's a scholar that knows a bunch of history about the world of Spira. He'll basically, if you want more lore and backstory in the game, Mei Chen's the one that will tell it to you. Alright, moving right along through into our lands for the deck, we are going to have a look at all of our colorless and gold lands and some of our dual types. So here we have Forge of Heroes. It's a land, taps for colorless, or tap, choose target commander that entered this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it if it's a creature, and a loyalty counter on it if it's a planeswalker. Great way to just proc that I need a 1/1 counter for Tidus to move. Shown here is one of the save spots, one of the shops that you find along your path in Final Fantasy X. Next up, we have Ash Barrens. We've seen this card already. This was in the Final Fantasy VI deck, but in case you didn't see that episode, Ash Barrens is a colorless land, taps for colorless, and has basic land cycling. You pay 1, you discard this card, you search your library for a basic land card and put it in your hand, then shuffle. Next, we have Temple of the False God. It's a land that taps for 2 colorless, but you can activate this only if you control 5 or more lands. Now, it does track itself, so as long as you have 4 other lands in this, it basically acts like an additional Soul Ring. This is the temple where you, I believe this is where you go to fight Lady Yunalesca, no relation to Lady Yuna, at the end of the game. This could also be the temple where you get anima. I don't remember. Next, we have Evolving Wilds. We have seen this in other decks, but we didn't go into depth on it because we wanted to wait until the Final Fantasy X deck, which is now. Evolving Wilds is a land that taps, sacrifices, and searches your library for a basic land card, puts it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffles. This is the Overlook, where the Crusaders of Yevon and the Albed finally team up and decide to, this is the Mihen High Road. They decide they're going to team up their forces to try and kill Sin because they want to try something new. It doesn't go very well. Lots of people end up dying. But, you know, they tried something new, so good for them. This area for me is actually especially memorable because I spent a lot of time running around the Mihen High Road, grinding up levels on my very first playthrough, some 25 years ago. Next, we have Nesting Grounds. It's a land taps for colorless, or you can pay 1, tap, move a counter from target permanent you control onto a second target permanent, activating only as a sorcery. You can see we have this red butterfly in the background, so this is one of the mini games you can get into in Guado Salam, where you have to chase these butterflies and catch them, and if you